For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:08, welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau. This is a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, and back, as always, Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. How are you, Josh?
Excellent, Dan, as always.
I'm very excited about tonight's show. As someone in the communications industry, you may have seen the Super Bowl halftime show. Well, our next guest is with a firm who helped put it together.
And they've done a number of shows throughout the world. Very exciting stuff. And this is a company that it's not been around for decades, but it's been around for at least one decade. Moment Factory, and we welcome Eric Fournier to the show. Welcome, Eric.
Hi, everybody.
Now, there's a lot of behind the scenes, when you ever see a production, a concert, a Super Bowl show, there's so much that happens behind the scene. Eric, maybe you can give the listeners a feel for what does Moment Factory do today?
Well, essentially, Moment Factory is combining the new technologies of projection, lighting, sound, special effects to create new multimedia environments. So we'll use projection to project on buildings. We'll use lighting and special effects to transform bars, nightclubs, stores.
Is there, maybe you can give one example to listener just to kind of show them exactly what maybe they have seen before.
So for the last 2 years, we've been producing a show on the Canadian Parliament called Mosaïka. So it's really a show of 30 minutes that tells the story to Canadian of Canada. So using projection technology, lighting technology, we use the Parliament as the background to a show.
Is it, and were you involved? Like, how did Moment Factory get started? Were you in at the beginning? Did you join all the way through? Give us a little bit of background on that.
Well, the history of Moment Factory dates back to about 10 years ago, and it was really a combination of talent of three guys coming from the world of photography, audiovisuals. I got to know Dominique Saction and Jason as I was at Cirque du Soleil. And at the time, I was in charge of new ventures, and at Cirque, we were looking at new ways of transforming environments, recreating the visuals environments that are those of Cirque du Soleil, the imaginary worlds that are known as being part of the Cirque du Soleil world. And using new multimedia technology was becoming more and more evident as a good way of transforming those environments, those spectacles, those events produced by Cirque du Soleil. So I decided at that point that I thought this was a great company to join.
Around in productions, or have you done kind of other things or other jobs or other studies in your life?
I've got a funny background. I mean, I graduated in business, then ended up in consulting, and from that point on, joined Bombardier, where I've been head of strategy for the rail business, and from that point, jumped to Cirque du Soleil for 5 years, where I was heading the New Ventures group.
So, and that's where you found your love of productions.
I guess the creative world, the imagination, letting go, the more imaginative part of myself, I guess.
Now you have two other partners. They started the company before you. How did you join them? How did you connect up with them?
It's very interesting because we are very complementary. I mean, Section is a guy coming from the world of photography visuals, so he handles more the content side of Moment Factory. Dominique Audet is from the technology side, so he handles much more the whole magic and the multimedia aspects behind our shows, and I'm taking care of the more business-like decisions.
So there's very little overlap of the three owners in your roles.
There's no overlaps, but we like to jump on each other's fields so to better know what business we're in and better make sure that all our decisions are the one of the group, not necessarily each one taking its decision and the other one taking its decision for its own field. We really like to have the best decisions made every time.
When you're working with such incredibly creative people, do you often have to be the one to say, okay, guys, that's not really realistic for this budget? A lot, I guess.
I guess it has to do with budget. It has to do with risk. It has to do with planning ahead of time. I mean, this is what I like to do, making sure that the creative sandbox is right for everybody so that the best idea gets out and so people feel comfortable doing their work, putting their best efforts.
Do you typically agree on the vision of the company and where you're heading? between the three of you?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, we've got meetings every Monday mornings. We sit together for a coffee and making sure that the week is aligned with the priorities set between us. So we have a vision. Our vision is we do it in public. So all our project must have some kind of a public component to it, and then we like to making sure that everybody in the company understands the same philosophy.
So you have, I mean, actually then the human resource element of it is absolutely huge and important. Are there certain key people that you rely on, or that you've created this team to make sure that your vision and your thoughts and your ideas get executed properly?
I guess it has to do with having people that have been around with us since the beginning. I mean, Moment Factory has been privileged in being able to keep the people within the company, not losing many talents as we've grown. I mean, our strategy, our approach is really to make those individuals feel good, having the best environment, and making sure that the next project is more innovative, more challenging than the past one. Reinventing ourselves is a key element in our business.
And you know, Dan, so many entrepreneurs that come in here, they always talk about their people. They always talk about, I mean, human resource is a huge element, but finding people is one thing. It's not always easy. Keeping them is a whole other ball game, because there's so many challenges. People either get bored or they want to move on. And if you have the right people and you have the right talent, you want to keep them motivated. You want to keep them challenged. And I'm very interested to hear when we come back from the break, Eric's idea in Moment Factory and how they try and how they manage to keep their good talent.
And they certainly need a lot of creative talent for that business. Eric Fournier of Moment Factory on today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller on today's Entrepreneur, and our guest this evening, Eric Fournier of Moment Factory. And Josh, an incredibly creative business, obviously requires a lot of creative talent, and it's important to retain that talent.
And just before we left, you know, Eric was explaining, there's a number of areas and ways that you have to deal with it. Eric, do you have any secrets, or what's worked for you in making sure that the talent kind of sticks around as long as possible?
Well, I guess the first thing is to making sure that the working environment is cool, relaxed, and there's no set rules on the way to work. So our place is fully open, it's wide, lots of space, lots of creative space, and then people can mingle around, go around, arrive at the time they want. I mean, what we like to encourage is freedom here, so that people know what the project they're on, know when it's got to be delivered, but the rest is for them to manage.
Do you ever find any of your good people or any of the employees or team take advantage of the flexibility and freedom that you offer them?
They take advantage every day. They do have some kind of a liberty of managing their time. I think what's really cool about it is that people are, when we're on a show, we'll spend the last 3-4 days before integration working 18 to 20 hours a day. That's what we like about it. So during the more calm weeks, we don't want them to show at 9 and leave at 5. We want them to manage their time so they've got their full energy when the big project will come on.
Do you ever get nervous giving your employees that much autonomy?
Well, nervousness will come if we don't deliver. So, I mean, part of the challenge is dealing with those young individuals, and sometimes it's more about peer pressure. It's the fact that everybody sees each other in the way they behave, and sometimes it's much more important than the approach we're going to take in giving orders, getting authority, and all that stuff that is more of the past. Today, it's more how the other around them will work, how professional they'll behave, that will create this approach to working.
So speaking of pressure and productions, I'm sure that some of the productions that you've been involved in or that you've created have had their challenges in trying to make sure that everything is up and running and on time and on schedule and dealing with the artists. Perhaps you can share with us maybe one or two challenges of some productions that you've been through where you've had to troubleshoot and make those decisions on the fly and keep your people in check and on track.
Well, I mean, most of the projects that Moment Factory is producing are one of a kind. They're innovative in what they're supposed to be doing. So every new project is different. So every new approach we're going to be taking needs to have some kind of a team effort to it. That one individual cannot do the whole project. So one of the values we have here at Moment Factory is fill the blanks, making sure that whatever you're doing, you're not leaving anything to the open for the next colleague or your team players. So I mean, the whole effort here is based on the notion that everybody must making sure that the other will contribute to the project and making sure that the whole thing is covered. So when we did the Fête des Lumières de Lyon, we decided that we would produce a show using a net as the backdrop to the projection. Because in the end, we didn't want to project on traditional building. We wanted to surprise. So we used a full net that we hang on top of the crowd. The challenge there was that it was the first time it was ever done. It was done in Lyon, not in Montreal. So we needed the team in Montreal to collaborate with the local partners there. We wanted the team in Montreal that was very minimal to go there to understand all the challenges associated with this innovation. So there, again, making sure that everybody can work together and making sure that they're not waiting for the other to fill the blanks.
Sounds like an interesting project, and in a moment we'll talk about another tough project which you guys had recently at Moment Factory, the big one, of course, Super Bowl, and the incredible challenges involved with that. Today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, chartered account, flmontreal.com.
7:25, welcome back to today's Entrepreneur. Our guest, Eric Fournier of Moment Factory. And Eric, one of the bigger projects you had recently, of course, was the Super Bowl halftime show, which featured Madonna. Tell us a bit about the effort and the creativity that went into that show from right here in Montreal.
Well, I guess everybody's aware of the magnitude of doing the halftime show can be. Adding to that the fact that it's Madonna that's been saying no to do the Super Bowl halftime show for many years. First time she's there. And so when we got the call from Cirque du Soleil, you wanted us to come with them to work on this project, we just could say yes, right? So then the whole project started. It was in mid-November, and we had to deliver for the Super Bowl, which was on February 5th. So the whole idea here was to work in good faith with all partners at the table from the get-go with Madonna, her team, the NFL, the NBC, Jamie King, and the team of Cirque du Soleil.
So you didn't have any written contracts as you were going through?
Well, we had shake hands. I mean, we're in a very creative world, so we need to create this more, I would say, level of confidence between the creators, and then the business will come after. That's the first lesson we've learned in doing our business.
Is that something that is typical in your industry or with your customers?
Well, it's again, I mean, what gets a contract started, what gets a project started is the great creativity behind it. So what we like to do with our clients, our people, is to get some kind of a level of confidence whereby we will work hand in hand. So that's, yes, maybe standard.
Now, let's talk marketing a little bit. I mean, you did the Super Bowl. There must have, it was a fantastic show. Does that do your marketing for you? Do you have other strategies to kind of get the word out there, make sure that Moment Factory, that's the name that people call on?
Well, essentially what we've decided to do 4 or 5 years ago was really to do our marketing through something we call pull marketing. Instead of doing a push marketing with salesmen going around the world, we wanted to bank on the viral aspect of what we do. So all our marketing efforts are put in making sure that there is our videos on the web, people can see what we do, and from that point on, then they can call us and get to know us through those videos that are circulating throughout the web.
And as each production goes, or as each success you have, I presume that the phone call or people see it, that they know they can contact Moment Factory.
Well, that's the objective, is to making sure that people will call us. They want something just like what they've seen on the web. So to a certain extent, it's pruning between the funny ideas to more serious needs.
So do you vet the customers as they come through, as they want to try and solicit your services? You do some checking, or you vet the ideas to make sure it's a real lead versus not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got 6 producers with each one of them having their own fields of specialty, and in the discussion with those leads, they can make the difference between the real project and the more funny ones.
And has the phone been ringing off the hook since the Super Bowl?
Oh yeah, I mean it's been unbelievable, the enthusiasm that it has created around Moment Factory. I mean, we must be receiving around 5 leads every day.
Wow.
You ever say no to a customer?
Well, I mean, at the heart of our business is the creativity. So every project needs to have a creative element. So if somebody wants us to repeat what they've seen somewhere on the web that we have done, we'll perhaps not be as interested. The other element has to do with the timeline. I mean, some projects are very interesting, but if they want it to be delivered in the next 6 weeks, we'll have to say no. I mean, we didn't wait for the Super Bowl to hire. We had our teams. We want to grow organically. We don't want to create a mushroom that's going to explode. I mean, we want to grow in a very stepwise manner, so to make sure that we can continue to deliver on our projects.
All right. Today's Entrepreneur continues in a moment with Eric Fournier of Moment Factory.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:36. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau. This is a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Josh Miller of Fuller Landau, and our guest this evening, Eric Fournier of Moment Factory.
Now, Eric, the one thing that's been on my mind for the last half hour or so is there's these huge productions, which I'm sure are rather costly. And there's got to be a cash flow management side to all these productions. That's today. You know, where did Moment Factory start out? Like, was financing an issue? Was it always an issue? Did you manage it carefully? Tell us a little bit about how kind of it started and where you stand today with that.
Well, essentially, Moment Factory has grown with 2 credit cards of $10,000 each. And when I joined in 2007, it was the only way they could finance the company, really by making sure that they would not bust their credit cards. So they had developed this approach whereby each project would have to be cash flow positive. So when I joined, I realized that if we wanted to grow, hire people, and not be dependent on a project-by-project basis, and making sure that we could get the paycheck being delivered to each employee on a bi-weekly basis, decided to go and negotiate lines of credits, traditional line of credit with the banks. So entered into a business plan development and began to chat and discuss with potential bankers.
But it's a traditional line of credit, not necessarily in a traditional business. Was it difficult to approach the bankers and kind of sell them on the idea that, hey, you know, we're in this crazy production world and believe in us?
Yeah, well, that was the funniest part. I mean, everybody was whom we were meeting, we're looking at what we were doing, looking at the cool videos, looking at the cool stuff, and they were saying, "Wow, it's amazing, it's great, but what's the model? Are you a product? Are you a service? Are you an entertainment? What's the model? What's behind it?" And in essence, we're a little bit of everything, and that's really in making sure with them that we could develop a dialogue that we found the right match with a bank.
Now you mentioned business plan before. Was that something that that Moment Factory always operated with when you came in? And of course, you were looking at bigger productions. That was the stepping stool or the starting point to say, let's go out and be a real company in the eyes of a banker?
Well, there was that, but there was also this need to making sure that we were sharing the same vision. There's nothing like putting on a piece of paper what we agree we want to do with this business, not only after this project, but later in a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road. So this business plan crafting was really about that, sharing a vision, sharing something that we felt good about it. It was not to please the bankers. It was really for us to making sure we knew where we wanted to go and being able to put it on paper.
Now, did you find a lot of support out there in the banking or the finance world, or was it an uphill struggle?
The time 2007, 2008, it was the post-internet crisis era, and most of the banks in Montreal that had developed this technology group were dismantling their teams, and so it was very difficult to find the banks that had the depth or the interest in our business. So it was a very difficult period of time.
So you managed to get through that, and And does that mean that you're right now, you deal with project by project? The management of each project kind of stands on its own from a finance standpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, we've introduced some tools to plan, estimate the project, and making sure with our contracts, with our partners, with our clients, that we manage the costs and the revenues and the costs and the cash flows positively on each project.
When you run such a creative business, is it hard to quantify that creativity?
Well, that's always the challenge, and I'm trying to stay away from trying to quantify creativity. The way I approach it and with my partners is to manage the downside risk. So again, as I was saying earlier, is really to create this sandbox for creativity whereby people know a little bit more how far they can go creatively. And that's how I guess we get the most of everybody, not giving them a blank sheet of paper that's so wide and open that they don't know where to go, and at the other extreme giving them a budget that's so restrictive that they don't have any space for creativity. It's really about the sandbox.
Managing the downside risk, very interesting statement. Can you explain a little bit what you mean, or maybe give us an example of a project where you specifically manage the downside risk?
Well, every time we've been looking at our projects from the beginning, we've always wanted to making sure that we innovate. And so every time we try to limit the innovation to a certain number of aspects. So managing the downside risk will be about partnering with people that know about an aspect that we don't master. So we'll be always open to teaming with other companies. We'll always look at ways whereby we can share the risk with other companies. We'll not take projects that are too big for us. We'll share. We're not a close-ended company. We're an open organization.
Speaking of innovation, speaking of financing, what about research and development tax credits? Is that something you take advantage of, believe in, try and get the most of?
Well, the tax credits on research and development has been a very interesting tool for us. As we've grown the company, we've always looked for new ways of managing interactivity, managing the effects, and in order to get those systems, the input, the sources, and the output, the lighting to work together, we needed to develop our own tools. So we've always counted on the RSD tax credit as a way of financing our research and development.
So you would say the government is good to you. Are there any other, is there any other aspects or divisions of the government? I mean, you're in this social, this cultural phenomenon. Has the government from its cultural divisions been helpful with your business?
Well, Moment Factory is an orphan. So on the one side, yes, we've got access to tax credits on research and development. But on the other side, we're kind of an orphan sitting between video games and the film industry. So on the one end, we don't have access to the video game industry, multimedia tax credit, or on the other end, the film post-production tax credit. So in as much as we would like to hire people from these fields, we cannot compete on the salaries.
And then technology must also play a huge role. Is it difficult to keep up with the technology?
Since the beginning, we've always defined ourselves as not being a technology company. So we've always wanted to remain innovative. So we've always worked with the new technologies. We don't buy our own projector. We subcontract the technology supply to third parties so that we maintain our independence, our autonomy vis-a-vis the new technologies that's going to get developed.
So is it something that you stay on top of, and certainly from a creative aspect, as you were mentioning before with the innovation and leaving that blank slate open, you and your team just are always out there and always looking for the most creative and innovative way to make that next production.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really cool about Moment Factory. We don't necessarily work only with projection. We don't necessarily work with lighting. We like to blend technologies. We like to mix them and work with cool surfaces. We've done the Elixir show at the Quartier des Spectacles projecting on water. We created these 3D effects by mixing the positioning of projectors and lighting. I mean, that's really cool about what we like to do. We like to stay away from having a preset technology to work with.
And more with Eric in a second. We'll also bring in the IT specialist, Kevin Ammerman from Fuller Landau, and he's going to talk about internal communications, especially if you have a business that's as creative as Moment Factory. Getting all the employees on the same page could be a challenge, so we'll address that with Kevin in just a second.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Our guests this evening, Eric Fournier of Moment Factory, and we also bring into the conversation Kevin Ammerman, IT specialist at Fuller Landau. And Josh, we were talking about data, and especially when you're in such a creative business like Moment Factory, you need to be able to keep track of stuff fairly efficiently. Kevin, what is the most, I guess, the best way to keep track of mounting files, of images, of data, of client records? What's the best way for businesses to keep all that info?
There's so many different tools to achieve those ends, and it really depends on the nature of your business and what you're trying to accomplish. So we've got companies such as Moment Factory that are stockpiling images and video and various more audiovisual kinds of materials. As an accounting office, we're more concerned about tax returns and personal information and security of personal information. And you've got to treat those things in different ways. But what it comes down to is you've got to structure it, and you've got to have a way to sort through this stuff and be able to find the information that you need quickly. Otherwise, you can't take on more information and actually use it in any helpful fashion.
And to keep everybody on the same page, like everybody in the same company should have ready access to information, should all be part of, we were talking about project management before, communication. It's one thing to do by email, but are there areas or challenges to keep people on the same page?
That's one of the first things that we see small businesses trying to implement is they've started to accumulate this data, and their employees have their own ways of navigating this data. But it's important to make sure that all the employees are on the same page and they're using the same tools to the greatest effect. So a lot of times what we see companies trying to do is document their own internal processes. So put together a repository of how-tos and manuals and different procedures within the company so that they have something to fall back on when they're trying to find something, or they're trying to find a place where the information fits in the future.
And are most new businesses now going to the cloud? And also, can you just clarify what the cloud is for those of us that don't know?
A lot of businesses are relying on the cloud. They're storing their information outside their own offices in servers that are managed by third parties such as Google or Microsoft or other organizations like this. But it really depends on the nature of the information. So if it really is internal documentation, then maybe it's not appropriate to be in the cloud. Maybe it should be inside, and that's fine. There are plenty of inexpensive ways to store that information in wikis or SharePoint databases or any number of different tools like this, as long as it's structured and people have constant access to it when they need it.
I've heard of this one concept, we live with it in trying to keep people with the same information on the same page, and it's called the intranet. Not the internet, the intranet. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how that could help companies and the team within that company stay on the same page.
The idea is that it's a web page or a set of documents, at least, for internal use only. So it's not accessible to your clients. It's generally not accessible from the outside world, but it's only accessible within your office, and it has tools specific to the way that you do business. So whether it's lists of projects and the status of those projects, or it could be something as simple as a list of birthdays for the employees, so you know when to stick a balloon on their door, or a set of documentation, so HR policy manuals and this kind of thing. Typically, there are definite security concerns. A lot of sensitive information is in there. A lot of businesses, it's basically a how-to manual for the entire business is stored on the internet. So it is important to keep a handle on that as well. But yeah, a lot of companies could really benefit from this, and it's tools that they've already purchased and they just need to implement.
Eric, as you manage, the company Moment Factory manages so many different projects with so many different people and artists and creative assistants and all that. How does each project team stay on the same page?
Well, we've developed our own intranet whereby people can share tasks and so on, and they can be assigned on projects on a weekly basis. The other element we've put tremendous efforts is making sure that the creativity, the base of the database of visuals and all the creativity gets structured and gets accessed on an ongoing basis, so to make sure that the project cannot be delayed or we can do a project more rapidly.
So an intranet type of, I guess, outlook or use has worked for you.
Absolutely, and coupled with that, also we've also worked with cloud, so to make sure that our teams that are sometimes on the fields can access the information from a remote location.
We'll talk more about technology in a second, and also we'll get Eric Fournier's words of wisdom for today's entrepreneur. That's next.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Remaining moments of today's entrepreneur with our guests Eric Fournier of Moment Factory and Kevin Ammerman, IT specialist at Fuller Landau. And Josh, we're talking about storing massive quantities of data at your business. What's the best way to do it, and what's the most secure way to do it?
And not only that, but it does take an individual to make sure that that area, the intranet or whatever, is populated. It doesn't just happen magically on its own. Kevin, maybe you can kind of fill us in a little bit on what you see as the challenges to make sure that things are like the intranet get populated.
Well, it's really important to have sort of a custodian of the information to make sure that it meets company specifications and everything is where it should be. But a big part of these tools today is it allows people to do self-service access to these bits of information. So it's not just one person that should be populating these databases, but the entire company should have the tools that allow them to do that. And part of the training that it's involved is in making sure that every member of the company knows what's supposed to be where and puts it in the right place and takes responsibility for it, so that that poor custodian isn't overloaded when it all comes down to the end of the day and somebody's looking for something.
So it takes a lot of communication internally as well.
Exactly.
Now, what about the type of information that's stored on there? You mentioned some sensitive information and security. Are there any areas that entrepreneurs, should be aware of, or some certain challenges when they're dealing with very secure and confidential information?
I think it's really tempting these days to use the tools that we have in ways that they're not really meant to be used. So sending personal information or privileged information via email or channels like this, it's really not very well encrypted, and it's really a high-risk kind of thing to do. So to appreciate the value of the data that you have and make sure that you treat it with care, and that if it's something that should be encrypted or it shouldn't be sent out for prying eyes to see, make sure that it's taken care of, at least that there's some sort of password applied to the file that you're sending, or that it's encrypted, or that you use an encrypted website rather than email to send this kind of information.
Is that something easy that anybody could do, or it really does take a certain level of know-how?
It's incredibly easy. Most people have the tools already at hand. It could be something as simple as when you send a file, just zip it and apply a password to that zip file. Or you can use paid services that manage this information and house it for you in an encrypted storehouse.
So bottom line is, know what you're doing before you just send out any information. It could really save you a lot of headaches in the future.
If in doubt, fax it.
There's a technology that we've heard.
Are people
for
still
a little
faxing?
while. People still faxing? Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Kevin. And as we come to the towards the end of the show, I turn to Eric, and Eric, ask you, what one piece of advice would you give to today's entrepreneur?
Wow.
We'll limit it to one at this moment.
Okay. No, I mean, I had the chance to work with two of the most successful entrepreneurs in Quebec, Laurent Baudouin at Bombardier and Guy Laliberté at Cirque du Soleil. And in my first years at Bombardier, being exposed to Laurent Baudouin and seeing how he was looking at projects and how he was looking at developing the business, one thing came rapidly as one of the fundamental elements in decision making, and it was about managing downside risk, making sure that there is no major risk at stake, so that then your job is to letting the talent express itself. And I kept that idea since then, and it's proven to be extremely useful.
Excellent, thank you. Dan, there are a couple of takeaways that I get from this show, and they're subtle because they were mentioned just a little bit, but they're really important. And one would be, if you don't deal with a contract, if you don't have a contract that's done, sometimes the entrepreneur just has to go with their gut, has to go with their feeling, and has to go with on a handshake to make sure that the job gets done or the customer gets satisfied. Not always easy to do, and you don't go into it lightly, but sometimes the gut has to take over and the entrepreneur just has to take that leap of faith. And the second is business plans. So many people do it for the wrong reason. So many people do it because a third party needs it, because they want to get financing, because they just, because it has to follow that plan of somebody else wanting to give them money. And in Eric's case, it was, no, you know what? We're doing it for ourselves first. And the entrepreneur should do a business plan for themselves first. Make sure that they're going in the right direction. Vet their own ideas. Make sure the partners are on the same page. That's huge. Do your business plan, do your cash flows for yourselves first, because that's who the most important person is in your business. The rest will follow.
Eric Fournier of Moment Factory, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
And Kevin Ammerman, IT specialist at Fuller Landau, thank you as well. And Josh, see you next Monday night at 7.
Next Monday night, Dan.
Today's Entrepreneur on Montreal's News Talk leader, CJAD 800.